Thank you, Dr. Oliver. It is a pleasure to introduce our moderator for this evening, someone who literally needs no introduction because he is on our TV screens giving us news reports what seems like 24 hours a day. Well, Al is an original in many senses of the word. He is Bay News 9's senior anchor and has been with the 24-hour news channels from day one. To call him a fixture in Tampa Bay is an understatement. He brings more than 44 years of experience, knowledge, and perspective to the anchor desk, including 26 years as an anchor reporter right here in the Tampa Bay area. His energy and enthusiasm can be seen in the afternoon on weekdays and on weeknights on the evening news. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Tampa Bay News 9, senior anchor, Mr. Al Ruschel.
Boy, you know you've been around here a long time when I can remember when Dennis Jones was actually a chiropractor. Dennis, how you doing? Good to see you. It's fun to be here tonight to talk politics. I never thought I would like politics, and I stumbled into it years ago at Bay News 9 when I thought it would be a good idea to do a political show, and nobody agreed with me, and they fought with me for 5 or 6 years. But then finally, when we jumped in with both feet and got our partners involved in the Tampa Bay Times, we put together a program that I think is a winner all the way around. We have tremendous numbers, most of the times beating out the major networks and their political shows, both at 11 in the morning and even 8 in the evening. We were really surprised that when we did a replay, especially on a primetime evening, that we would get as many viewers as we did, but we've always had a lot, and I'm very thankful for that. So if you're one of our regular viewers, thank you so much, and if you're not, why not? Okay? We'll talk about it outside the building later. Let me welcome you all. We have a great partnership with St. Petersburg College, besides the fact that my wife works in the academic advising department down in the Gibbs campus, and we share wonderful stories about really wonderful students in the evenings, and sometimes not so wonderful, but mostly wonderful kids who really are very wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, as we say, and are very excited about life. And we want to keep that excitement going even through the process of politics. The issue tonight, political campaign ads. Yikes. With the subtitle, "Why do you approve this message?" That is a very good question, and tonight we hopefully are going to learn a lot about why some of these ads we see are produced the way they are and your reaction to them. You know, TV political advertising is a relatively new medium. As you have seen on the slides that were rolling as you were eating, back in 1956, that was a mere 1958 years ago. Oh, my Lord. I was born in 51, in case you were wondering. I know some of you thought I was in my 30s, but, you know, that was before I had my facelift 3 months ago, but now I'm much younger. Democratic candidate Adlai Stevenson said, "The idea that you can merchandise candidates for high office like breakfast cereal is the ultimate indignity to the democratic process." Hey, I don't know about you, but I have my regular presidential candidate for breakfast every morning, don't you? Wonder if Adlai is ever turning over in his grave? Well, probably not. And just 10 years later, in 1968, the prominent TV producer and Nixon campaign consultant Roger Ailes, you heard of that name? Said this, "Television is no gimmick, and nobody will ever be elected to major office again without presenting themselves well on it." At this point, I could tell you a secret. There's one particular candidate who always brings a fan along with him to do his interviews. Anyway, because sweat can be one of your greatest enemies. When people appear on my television program, I always say, "Don't worry about sweating. I will sweat for you because I'm just a sweat machine. So you don't have to get nervous anymore because I'll be nervous for you." So anyway, we've come quite a way in a relative short amount of time. Let's set the stage now by taking a brief look back at some of the classical political ads from presidential campaigns from television's earliest days in 1952 to the most recent in 2012. These ads were selected from each of the decades to show several things: the advance of graphic imagery, the contrast between the advertising tone and style between two candidates, the tit for tat as candidates respond to attack ads, and the level of negativity in some of the ads. Note especially, and we all remember this one, the anti-Goldwater spot from 1964 that was simply called "The Daisy Girl," which some say was one of the most effective political ads ever created. And pay special attention to the George W. Bush 2000 campaign ad on prescription drugs. See if any of you can spot something special, an effect that occurred in that one. So right now, let's go ahead and watch some of these on the screen.
Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike for president, Ike for president. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president. Hang out the banner, beat the drum, we'll take Ike to Washington. We don't want John
or Dean
or Harry, let's do that big job right. Just get in step with the guy that's hep, get in step with Ike. You like Ike, I like Ike, everybody likes Ike for president.
It's ad-lib to you, ad-lib to me. I don't care how you quote it. Ad-lib, ad-lib, don't pronounce it. Just go out and vote it. Stevenson! Kennedy, 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 Kennedy.
Do you want a man for president who's seasoned through and through, but not so doggone seasoned that he won't try something new? A man who's old enough to know
and young enough to do.
Well, it's up to you, it's up to you, it's strictly up to you.
Do you like a man who answers straight, a man who's always fair?
Mr. Nixon, what is the truth? Can we continue to have peace while Khrushchev is trying to stir up the whole world against us?
Well, the truth is that we must continue to have peace. And we can if we continue to show firmness and strength to the communist world. Khrushchev is a cold, hard, ruthless man. He feeds upon weakness and doubt. And we must never make the mistake of letting him think we are weak.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other, or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
The McGovern Defense Plan. He would cut the Marines by 1/3. The Air Force by 1/3. He'd cut Navy personnel by 1/4. He would cut interceptor planes by 1/2. The Navy fleet by 1/2. And carriers from 16 to 6. Senator Hubert Humphrey had this to say about the McGovern proposal. It isn't just cutting into the fat. It isn't just cutting into manpower. It's cutting into the very security of this country.
1982. Reaganomics sinks our country into the deepest recession and unemployment in 50 years. Now Ronald Reagan says the economy is moving up. It is, up on a mountain of debt and record Reagan deficits. More borrowing than all the other presidents in history combined. That'll drive interest rates up, slow the economy down, and then, if you're thinking of voting for Ronald Reagan in 1984, think of what'll happen in 1985.
Bush and Dukakis on crime. Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
The most powerful man in the world is also mortal. We know this all too well in America. 1 in 5 American vice presidents has had to rise to the duties of commander-in-chief. 1 in 5 has had to take on the responsibilities of the most powerful office in the world. For this job, after 5 months of reflection, George Bush made his personal choice, J. Danforth Quayle. Hopefully, we will never know how great a lapse of judgment that really was.
I Under Clinton-Gore, prescription drug prices have skyrocketed, and nothing's been done. George Bush has a plan. Add a prescription drug benefit to Medicare.
Every senior will have access to prescription drug benefits.
And Al Gore? Gore opposed bipartisan reform. He's pushing a big government plan that lets Washington bureaucrats interfere with what your doctors prescribe. The Gore prescription plan, bureaucrats decide. The Bush prescription plan, seniors choose.
The original Mavericks. He fights pork barrel spending. She stopped the bridge to nowhere. He took on the drug industry. She took on big oil. He battled Republicans and reformed Washington. She battled Republicans and reformed Alaska. They'll make history. They'll change Washington. McCain-Palin. Real change.
I'm John McCain, and I approve this message.
I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
They call themselves Mavericks. Whoa. Truth is, they're anything but. John McCain is hardly a maverick when 7 of his top campaign advisors are Washington lobbyists. He's no maverick when he votes with Bush 90% of the time. And Sarah Palin's no maverick either. She was for the bridge to nowhere before she was against it. Politicians lying about their records, you don't call that maverick. You call it more of the same.
There are 47% of the people who will vote for the president no matter what. All right, there are 47% who are with him, who are dependent upon government, who believe that they are victims, who believe that government has a responsibility to care for them, who believe that they're entitled to health care, to food, to housing, to you name it. That it's an entitlement, and the government should give it to them. And they will vote for this president no matter what. And so my job is not to worry about those people. I'll never convince them.
Wow. I actually felt sick to my stomach.
I don't like it.
It shows that he's out of touch, that if he thinks that half of the country is feeling like victims.
Victims? I wouldn't say so. I don't think that's part of the American fabric.
I'm not looking for a handout. I don't think anybody is ever looking for a handout. I think that we all want chances and opportunities.
If you've been successful, you didn't get there on your own. You didn't get there on your own. I'm always struck by people who think, well, it must be because I was just so smart. There are a lot of smart people out there. It must be because I worked harder than everybody else. Let me tell you something. If you got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
My father's hands didn't build this company. My hands didn't build this company. My son's hands aren't building this company. Did somebody else take out the loan on my father's house to finance the equipment? Did somebody else make payroll every week or figure out where it's coming from? President Obama, you're killing us out here.
President Obama attacks success, and therefore under President Obama we have less success, and I will change that.
That last ad was just released last week, by the way. Just little humor. Come on, come on. All right, you know, I guess it's more interesting. I love looking at those spots because, boy, now, you know, history is 2020 when you're standing on the other side, so it's really pretty incredible. Now, did any of you notice what happened in the Bush ad? Maybe some of you have heard about this, that something occurred on the screen. Did any of you happen to see what it was in that last Bush ad? I'd noticed it because I knew what it was. Had I not been told what it was, I wouldn't have noticed it. Okay? Let's show what it was. You see the word rats? That actually appeared very quickly in a changing of one slide to the other, but had I not been told about it, I wouldn't have caught it, but this time I caught it and I saw it. It was highlighted for just a split second, almost faster than you could see it. What effect, if any, would that have on a person's voting? We'll ask the experts later on, but note, it was actually run in the Bush campaign. And before I say another word, Coca-Cola also did the same thing to you and I for many, many, many years when they ran the ads in the movie theaters. In between those beautiful dripping glasses of Coca-Cola, there were plenty of shots of desert and dry, empty glasses, subliminal advertising. But none of us would ever be swayed by that. One final video to show you that negative campaigning advertising is not a recent phenomenon. Watch this modern-day adaptation of the attack ads aimed at the two candidates for president back in 1800, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Let's watch.
John Adams is a blind, bald, crippled, toothless man who wants to start a war with France. While he's not busy importing mistresses from Europe, he's trying to marry one of his sons to a daughter of King George. Haven't we had enough monarchy in America?
I'm Thomas Jefferson, and I approve this message because John Adams is a hideous, hermaphroditical character with neither the force and firmness of a man nor the gentleness and sensibility of a woman.
If Thomas Jefferson wins, murder, robbery, rape, adultery, and incest will be openly taught and practiced. The air will be rent with the cries of the distressed, the soil will be soaked with blood, and the nation black with crimes. Are you prepared to see your dwellings in flames, female chastity violated, children writhing on a pike?
I'm John Adams, and I approve this message because Jefferson is the son of a half-breed Indian squaw raised on hoe cakes, and Hamilton is a Creole bastard brat of a Scotch peddler.
Man alive. So we have a tumultuous past, don't we? But we have still survived all of these years. That was 214 years ago. And negative advertising, I guess, has always been around and probably will always be with us, or will it? We're going to find out from our experts who have joined us tonight. We're privileged to have a professional perspective on political advertising. We have two veteran Pinellas County political consultants and a distinguished professor of political science to open up our discussion. First, Dr. Susan McManus, distinguished professor of political science at the University of South Florida, a nationally recognized political analyst. Dr. McManus, come on up and have a chair. And she is, thank you for being with us tonight, Dr. McManus. And she's nursing kind of a scratchy voice tonight, so she's going to talk very sultry, but don't don't get any ideas. All right. Next, we're going to have Mr. Jack Ebert, founder and president of the Mallard Group, a Clearwater political consulting and direct mail firm. Jack, thank you for joining us. And finally, Mr. Gregory Wilson, a political consultant with Parsons Wilson, a St. Petersburg political consulting firm. Now, I know that you never sit around and watch TV this afternoon, but how many of you happened to see the interview that we did with these two gentlemen today? Oh, my gosh. That's disappointing. Oh, well, I won't tell anybody if you won't. Anyway, they didn't see it. What are we talking about? Anyway, we had a conversation with the two of them, and then Dr. McManus is joining us tonight. You can read their full biographies in the program, but needless to say, they have made quite names for themselves. So we're going to start out by hearing from Gregory Wilson.
What a hard act to follow, between Al Rochelle and a reel full of commercials like that. So good evening, and I confess, I am a political consultant. Do I look anything like you expected? Well, I know it's kind of hard without a smoke-filled room, but see, no horns, no tail. Really, political consulting is a lot like other professions, law, engineering, or medicine. We all have our specialties. So you can imagine when I was first brought home to meet Dad, based on who he figured me to be working with, he looked like I was in the field of proctology. Actually, politicians and political consultants have a lot to thank lawyers for. They stole our joke, the one about how to tell when a politician is lying. So, my title at my firm is Creative Director, and that means I don't have to know nearly as much about politics as most political consultants, but I have to know how to make up stuff better than they do. So it's something of a gift. David Clement, the nice man responsible for bringing this formidable panel together tonight, met with Jack and I a month ago, fully expecting us to be evil incarnate. We rather took exception to his tone. And you see, some of us in this business are old school. We're civilized. We're polite. Jack recently was kind enough to refer to me as his noble opponent, and I was touched. And I still think of Jack as the Duke of Darkness. But I like him and I trust him, and I wouldn't hesitate to work together with him on a campaign. So witnessing this camaraderie between alleged mortal enemies, David softened his stance and presented me a revised list of questions that will take, I don't know, about 5 hours to answer. But he gave me 10 minutes. So here we go. My first responsibility this evening is to define the term negative. Wow, where do I start? In far too many instances, a candidate will view anything that an opponent says as negative. Our political system is that polarized. Just saying hello to your opponent at a candidates forum can go very bad. We could spend a lot of time tonight identifying a few dozen variations of negative campaign messaging, but I believe David's second question is really more important. He asks, is negative merely in the eye and ear of the beholder? Yes. Now, I don't intend to get off that easy, but consider this. There are three kinds of candidates: an incumbent seeking re-election, a challenger who wants his or her job, and two or more candidates seeking an open seat. It is the challenger's responsibility to give voters good reason to fire the incumbent from the job he or she wants to keep. From that start, it's an inherently negative campaign. So David asks, what is the rationale behind negative political advertising? Why do politicians and their consultants employ attack ads? Well, first of all, few of us call them attack ads. But there are four practical reasons for any campaign to go negative. First, when taking on an incumbent. Second, when being seriously outspent. Third, when there is solid evidence that the opponent has done wrong. And last, when the candidate has little name recognition. Now, here's another way of looking at it. Whether you have a poll or not, a campaign either believes that they are ahead or they are behind. And most challengers are behind. If you believe you're behind, the question then is whether you can catch up and surpass your opponent with the strength of your name recognition and positive messaging, or whether you need to pull your opponent back with negative advertising. Regardless of the many variables we must consider before we pull the trigger on negative advertising, none the least of which is whether it'll do more harm to us than good, candidates have to be prepared to ask and answer this question in every campaign. Whether they choose to proactively go negative or feel they must respond to an attack from the other side, it is hard to fathom a campaign today that will not consider using some form of negative advertising. So David asks, is negative political advertising a legitimate campaign tool? Well, we've kind of already seen how the audience feels, but I'll answer, of course it is. There really might be legitimate reason that voters are unaware of why they should not elect candidate A or re-elect candidate B. In a sense, and I expect a few groans here, negative political advertising really can serve the public interest. Thank you. Thank you very much. So while we always hope that the news media will do the dirty work for us, candidates and campaigns must always be prepared to give reason why voters should fire the incumbent or why they shouldn't elect the other candidate. When it comes time to go negative is when all the nuance begins. What's fair game? What's off limits? What goes too far? And I bet, at least 52% of the people here feel too many campaigns have gone too far. So the next question asked is, why do attack ads seem so much more vicious with each election cycle? Certainly much worse than 20 years ago. Or are they really no worse than in previous decades, or even than in previous centuries? Of course, after seeing that last ad, maybe the centuries got us. So to me, this is actually an academic question better left to Dr. McManus to quantify, but I'll offer these observations. First of all, times have changed and so have laws. Candidates are less relevant to their own candidacies every year. In some races, it's not unusual for a political party or other private interests to far outspend a candidate in his or her own race. This practice was well underway long before the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, but that only made things much worse. Thank you very much. Second, more money is being spent on campaigns at an alarming rate. Abraham Lincoln spent about $2.8 million in today's dollars on his 1860 presidential campaign. Barack Obama and Mitt Romney both exceeded $1 billion in 2012, over 350 times more than Lincoln spent. This is not just a presidential phenomenon. Increasingly, we're seeing political committees spend money all the way down to the bottom of the ballot. A recent local school board race is a good example. Third, there are many more ways to spend all this money to reach out and touch voters, and with expanded broadcast and internet options. With more capacity, together with a lot more money, you're literally seeing more advertising everywhere. So the ads may or may not be more vicious, but there can be no question that there's a lot more of them. Lastly, and this is more my personal opinion than anything I can substantiate, I feel the people that are producing most of this negative advertising are creatively lazy, relying too much on high production value and not enough on good copywriting. In that regard, no, I don't think they're more vicious. I think many of them are laughably stupid. So, what do these four observations mean to me? There is a basic formula in media buying about optimum efficiency scheduling involving frequency and reach measurements that tell you when you've spent enough to be effective on a particular channel and when it's time to buy somewhere else. Given the profitability of political advertising from committees, no radio or TV station wants to tell you this, but when you see back-to-back ads fill spot break after spot break, I think it's safe to say that we're overwhelming people to the point where they just don't care anymore. 20 scan lines, all uppercase, 4 full seconds. That's the technical specifications for the political disclaimer you see on a television commercial. Can you read all the small print in 4 seconds? Of course you can't. So there is no practical transparency about who is raining all of this messaging down on us. Voters can't really tell who is saying what, who is paying for it, nor why. And the truth is, they're probably long past caring. The Citizens United decision will only make matters worse. More super PACs are bound to be formed, and corporations are will undoubtedly challenge any remaining laws in place intended to protect government from the corruption of money. So David's last question actually kind of made me laugh, but in a cynical kind of way. He asked, is there any legal restriction in what you can say about an opponent, true or not? That is, can you be sued for grossly misrepresenting an opponent? Well, I assume that anyone can file a lawsuit these days, but it will take a long time to resolve, and it's rare when the plaintiff prevails. The greater risk to grossly misrepresenting an opponent is if the public finds the attack ad, okay, I'll call it that, repugnant and revolting. But will they? Can the aggrieved candidate afford to abruptly reprioritize their whole campaign to defend against the attack? Will the news media step forward to set the record straight and admonish the wrongdoers? The odds aren't good. Chances are the offending party will be very slow to take down the attacking commercial. Chances are the offending party won't be a candidate. There'll be a political committee that no one has ever heard of. And it may be a committee that was just formed last week in order to launch that particular attack. This is the world of politics today, and it's not limited to federal or gubernatorial candidates at the top of the ballot. Now, lest I misrepresent myself, I am a consultant to smaller down-ballot races. Sadly, I'm not expecting a call from Hillary Clinton next week. But go ahead and give her my number if you want. But I am increasingly concerned for the welfare of my clients and for the constituents that they endeavor to serve. We never know when some obscene sum of money will come out of nowhere, overwhelm us, force us off course to respond, and otherwise prevent us from fighting the good fight. In closing, negative political advertising really needs no definition, but sadly there's a good chance that people will cheer you for doing it. We use negative advertising as a tool that is long proven to work. Some of us use it as precision instruments, others as a blunt object. I don't feel today's negative ads are more vicious. I think they're shallow, sickly overproduced, and often insulting to our intelligence. And because there are so many more of them on TV, in the mail, and creepily following us wherever we go on the web, I imagine we are nurturing a very cynical, untrusting, and uncaring generation of citizens. You're in good hands with Jack and Susan here. Both are true seasoned professionals. Do get your questions answered tonight. I don't think you'll see any of us hold back about how we really feel. Thank you very much.
All right, Jack, you're on effectiveness of attack ads.
This gets harder and harder to follow. Thank you, Village Square, Dr. Oliver, David, for all your hard work. This is my second invitation to this stage this year, which I guess bodes well because that means I must have done something right, although I was admonished by Judge Greer, who said, Jack, good talk, too long, too damn long. So I'm going to try to fix that tonight. It's a pleasure to be asked to be on this platform with these other distinguished speakers. Susan McManus and I have been friends and admirers, co-admirers, I hope, over the years, over the work that she does, molding young minds over there and being a spokesperson for the political scene around the state. And Gregory, like I said, even though we've been on the opposite sides many times, we're still at the end of the day able to sit down and enjoy a scotch. Which is kind of unusual because most of my Democrat friends don't drink scotch, so Gregory's the exception to that. I'm going to do something tonight I never do. I'm going to take my own advice. I think I'm pretty good usually. As consultants, we're pretty good at giving our advice to people, long political speech, candidate, short political career, short speech, long career. Don't give a speech, tell a story. Make it connect with the audience. Don't talk down to your audience, all those kind of things. And so I'm going to try to follow some of those in my tale tonight to talk a little bit about the behavior of, the human behavior of negative advertising and perhaps looking at the dark side as the Duke of Darkness. As consultants, we try to stay out of the media. Sometimes that doesn't always succeed, and some of you know that I haven't always succeeded at that, but we do try to do the right thing for our clients. I want to talk about two examples that were based on two phone calls just within the last 48 hours that I got. We're 3 weeks out from the primary election. Had two races that would be decided in the primary, down ballot races largely. First call was from a candidate last night. Jack, I'll leave the names out so that we don't, so the innocent can be protected. Said it was a great campaign. Thank you so much. Of course, he won. You did a usual great job. I've gotten so many nice phone calls. Our ads were so great. They were so bright and beautiful and pleasant and pretty, and the music was great. Even the dog was smiling in the TV ads. All my friends have said, that's the way it should be. That's the way, by gosh, the campaign should be. And I just couldn't do that negative stuff. You knew I couldn't, and I appreciate that or whatever. And I said, well, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that. I wish all campaigns could go that way. And what I quietly wanted to say, okay, we had the most money, you had the power of incumbency, you had an opponent that was not at all known, an opponent that had no money, and when he said something, it was either wrong or he offended somebody. So this was kind of like shooting fish in a barrel, but I didn't say that. I accepted the accolades and moved forward. The other call this morning was not quite that great from a candidate that lost. And let me say, as Gregory will probably tell you, it's an occupational hazard in what we do, I think, particularly at our stage in life, that you become friends with your clients, whether you want to or not. There is a certain buy-in, believe it or not, particularly at my age. I mean, I tend not to represent candidates that I don't think can do a good job, that I don't believe in, or that I don't want to work for. Maybe that's, you know, because of the station in life, but you do make a personal connection and you get invested and get to be good friends with these people. But this campaign didn't go too well. A 5-way primary race for an open seat, 3, maybe 4 of the 5 very competitive candidates, a 16-month campaign, which anybody that's been involved in a political campaign knows that's arduous at best to keep momentum going for 16 months. We raised a lot of money. Everybody raised a lot of money. It got very ugly, particularly in the last month or so, and we had tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of negative, largely negative advertising coming in from outside groups, some money from outside Washington. This is a Florida race in a rural area as opposed to my other race that was in an urban area. And we ran the most beautifully positive campaign about a family that had been invested in the city for 50 years and 2 generations, 3 generations, had done great things for the community, beautiful biography, everything. The negative stuff started running, and you would not have believed it was the same person. I mean, suddenly my candidate was the inventor of Obamacare, who stood to profit, I mean, beyond a stretch of the imagination. Bottom line, the election came, we lost. Second place. Better funded than the opponents, and a positive, I thought, well done campaign, talking about all of the great things that this family had done in the community and why it should go to the next step. The moral to the story was, in fact, early on we had the conversation. I had the conversation with a candidate, and we have this in every race. In fact, my earliest meetings with candidates usually are, Senator Jones or Dennis, tell me why you want to do this because it's a really stupid idea. You're going to work like hard, beg people that you don't want to for money, you know, put your reputation on the line, do everything you can to put your entire life out there in front of the public. You're going to have your spouse mad at you within 2 months. Your kids are not going to speak to you. Your neighbors are not going to have a lot to do with you. Dogs are going to follow you around and want to bite you before this is over. Explain to me why you want to do this, because I think it's important that candidates understand from the get-go that what they're up against. And so invariably that conversation is had. Are you prepared, or when it gets ugly, you know, what will you do? You know, what will be your response? And in this case, this particular candidate, I have an investment in this community. My family's been here for 3 generations. That is not my style. That is not what I do. That is not what I want to do. And so we didn't. And the last week, when all hell broke loose, you know, and the phone rings, it's like, well, Jack, where's our negative on the opponents? Where's our negative? Well, we had this conversation, did we not? That you didn't? Yeah, but now I've been punched in the stomach. None of this is true. None of this is true, but I have no response, and we need to do something. And my answer is it's too late. I mean, that is that's a conversation that you have to have earlier. My point is, in the whole thing is, and as consultants we talk about it, the unfortunate situation now is the decisions are made in these campaigns that largely take them as a race to the bottom. And it's if you're not prepared to be able to, sometimes it's more than just being able to defend your reputation, it's being able to go after the other guy and be able to define the other person either early or at some point in the campaign and say, this is the contrast between the campaigns. And the fact of the matter is that I firmly believe that negative, or I prefer to call it comparative advertising, if it's factual, on the public record, and it points out things that are in the public record about your opponent that may impair their ability to serve an office, then that's legitimate, you know, a legitimate fodder to be talked about in a campaign. That's how people make decisions. So the end of 2 phone calls, 2 different stories, and both of them, you know, with play, one at play with negative advertising, one with not. I think we'd all love to run the unicorn lollipop campaign over here that was all blue and green, and not the red, nasty, bleeding ones over here. But that's where we've come to, and that's kind of the playing field that we have right now. So in a Dickinsonian sense, I guess it was the worst of times, it was the best of times. It was the age of wisdom, but it's also the age of foolishness in many regards. I'm a little different than people like Gregory, perhaps, in my ascension to decide to do this. It was kind of a left turn. My original plan was to be an artist. Now, my dad was a banker, so that didn't go over very well. But I studied very young and had a little art talent. I studied with an artist and who was a bit of a stickler and a very talented Florida landscape painter on the East Coast. And he made us work very hard and taught us that we got 3 colors of paint in our efforts, and from that we were to make every possible color, and you could, and you can in theory, make every possible color. So at a very early age I learned the discipline of being able to do that, which I say to this day probably had some practical use. Number one, it did ultimately convince my father that I was not going to be able to make a living doing this, which he was happy about. But number two, when I got to this job, I found some very great similarities, except instead of 3 colors, we only get 2. And that's the color of hope and the color of fear. And there's no other way to make that any simpler other than to maybe euphemize it and say we've got good and bad, or we've got evil and greatness. And so that's basically all you're trying to do. And I would argue with you that most people make their political decisions very simply. We try to overcomplicate this, and Susan will before it's over, I'm sure, and I love her for it. But I kind of make it this simple. It's a 3-step decision. Number one, who do I know? Do I know that name? Have I heard that name before? Is it something that resonates or what? Sometimes we never get past that. The second question, who do I like? Do I like her? Does what she say make sense to me? Do I really like what they're saying? And third, do I trust them? Do I trust that what she says, what he does, what he's done, or whatever will be truth? And that's basically it. I mean, that is the decision, whether it happens in the polling booth or whether it happens weeks before as you look at these ads. That's about all we have to work with 2 colors on the palette and 3 major decisions that people are making in this strange business that we're in. That's what we're up against, and it's difficult. Now, the contrary to that is, who do I not know, who do I not like, and who do I not trust? And I would argue that that becomes an important part of the debate also in people helping to make those decisions. Gregory talked a little bit about, well, is there more political, is there more nastiness, is there more negativity, and we saw some examples going way back. And I would argue, I'd be right there with Gregory, no, I don't think anything is any less nasty. In fact, I took the time, and I'm not a political scientist, as I just relayed to you in my background. I was trained as an artist and an advertising guy, and read the Declaration of Independence. Now, I would suggest that you go home and do that sometime if you haven't done it recently. It is a brilliant document. But the interesting part is all that stuff we kind of remember, all that really beautiful stuff at the front paragraph is about it. 3/4 of the Declaration of Independence is a rant, literally a rant of 27, I counted them, 27 different atrocities that Thomas Jefferson and the others sat down and decided that King George III had perpetrated on the colonists. And I understand from historians that at the time that the Founding Fathers were putting this together, the consensus pretty much, there was no great consensus that this was a good idea among the public. And so the Founding Fathers had the charge of, okay, let's put this thing together, and we've got to go out and sell it because we've got to get 13 colonies to agree to this so we can put it into force. And so what better way than to put it in front of everybody and try to get some buy-in, perhaps, by saying King George is really a bad person who's done some really ugly things to us. It's largely a very negative document, but yet the framer of everything that we respect today. I think that the negativity has not changed through time. We've seen that in some of these ads. But I do think my consensus, and I agree with Gregory on this, is that the volume is what's increased. As an advertising guy, I will tell you the assault from the media in the earliest days, of my profession, this was pretty simple. There were 3 networks out there to buy ads on. There were a few more newspapers, sometimes a morning and an evening. They have not proliferated. They've gone the other way, but we had some newspapers out there. So your campaign, revolved around creating a nice ad for television, maybe, a couple nice print ads, a brochure, and a couple sign designs, and that was the end of it. That was before we had literally 1,000 different channels of broadcast across the spectrum or more, terrestrial, satellite, internet channels now. The selection is mind-boggling. The print platform, though it's dissolving in a traditional sense, has now moved to a digital platform. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have Yelp, we have everything, YouTube, we have everything else, every other blog, blob, that I refer to some of them as, that we have to deal with, some of questionable, if not no value at all. We have the Tampa Bay Times creating things like the Buzz, which I call a virtual restroom wall that people can ride on at night. We have so many more things out there that are tools that are on the good side, but that are also on the bad side, that it becomes a much more complicated affair, not only from the candidate side, but it's got to be mind-boggling and confusing for the average voter out there to be able to take in all this, analyze it, and say, what is the truth, what is the real truth, what is the whole truth, and how can I decide who I really like and who I really trust? So it becomes a lot harder. But definitely the volume has been turned up on all of this stuff. But I think at a very basic level, and I'll close on two notes that I want you to think about. Let's face it, we all have a fascination with the dark side. Duke of Darkness, I'll take it. And I don't, I'm not a psychology major to espouse on it, but if you think about it, you're not going to take the tabloids away from the checkout at the grocery store. I mean, people are going to want to know the worst that Justin Bieber is up to this week. That's not going to change. I'm convinced in another regard or whatever. I understand NASCAR is a very popular sport. I'm not a follower or whatever, but I will tell you that I don't think that people that frequent NASCAR races are really, really enthralled with the idea of noisy things going around in a circle a lot. I think there's something else going on there. Just my thought. I like to tell my clients when things start to get a little bit, a little bit edgy and a little bit negative, it's like, look, who said that the prize fight between the boxing champs was going to get excited until somebody got a bloody nose? People are waiting for that particular moment. It is the moment. Relish in it. And I'd also like to point out the one I'm proud of, the greatest, Walt Disney, the inventor of the happiest place on earth, unarguably. Name me a Disney movie that doesn't have a villain. Just one. You won't find one. So it is part of the human condition, and something we have to put up with. As to the future and where it goes from here, I don't see any of this changing. I hope that people are able to see and use their skills to better understand where some of this is going and where the truth is. It gets harder and harder, arguably. PolitiFact, people like Al Rochelle and the work that they do over at Bay News 9 and some of the media. Even the media is undergoing a transition. We can't even depend on the newspapers to do, the traditional newspapers to do what they used to, so they're evolving, hopefully, that will continue to be the watchdogs. But this volume is going to continue to go up. Look at just the last week. Who knows what year the first iPhone came out? Who out there knows what year? Help me. A long time ago. The first iPhone, the first smart iPhone, 2007. Okay? It took Apple 1 year to sell 1 million phones. A few years later, they came up with something a little bigger called an iPad. It took 28 days to sell 1 million of those. What happened last Tuesday? Tim Cook did his reveal. The iPhone 6 is coming out. It's not out yet. It'll be out this week. In 24 hours, Apple sold out over 4 million of those devices. So if you think that you won't be more connected and won't be able to see more negative ads, you're mistaken, because they're coming. And they're getting smarter, and we know where you live, and we know how to find you. I watched that reveal, and there was mention of one other thing, I don't know, some of you have probably read about or seen, called the Apple Watch. And the idea here is soon that you'll be able to carry this in a smaller version on your wrist, which intrigued me. It does a variety of things, syncs with your phone or whatever. It does fitness stuff. It'll read your heartbeat. It allows you to send your heartbeat to somebody. It does all kinds of, it's a crazy device. I'll probably be in line in January to get one. But I will warn you, I started last night thinking about my first Apple Watch political ad. Here's how it goes. Hope to send you my opponent's heartbeat, but I couldn't. He doesn't have one. Thank you.
Dr. Susan McManus, who we've all come to know and love in the Bay Area, she really is an advocate for getting kids involved in politics and the positive side of things. Dr. McManus, always good to have you with us.
How's everybody? Better than me. Whoops, this is much better. Thank you. I have a little slideshow to show you a little bit about how we in the political analyst realm are looking at things. That's not the slideshow I prepared, but we'll move along here. I think here's where I'd like to start, and this is putting things in context, because when people receive messages, you have to look at the arena in which they're receiving them. And so right now, we as analysts are looking at this slide right here very carefully, because you see that for a long time now, people have felt that the direction the country is headed in is really in the wrong direction, to the point of where you have almost 2/3 of the people saying that. It's not a new phenomenon. So this gubernatorial campaign, all the ads are being plopped into this already negative environment. The same thing is true with the president's job approval. People are dissatisfied with that. It's been going on for a couple years now. And then you also look at the absolute worst, Congress, horrible ratings. Let me just say something. In the history of polling, we have not seen this level of negativity against our major governing institutions. And so when people get barraged with negativity, they're kind of tired of it, and they're looking for something inspirational. And lest we think that it's just institutions, the two parties aren't doing real great either. And this was, again, a national election study that shows a slippage in support of how people feel about the two major parties. And look at this, a survey that asked how ethical certain professions are. I'm sorry, Al, but you're number 2 here. The journalists, number 1, 78% of Americans, this is a national survey, said that they felt that that these people were highly unethical. Then you look at some other slides. What's the bigger problem in politics today? Is it money, or is it media bias? We call it the M&M question. And you can see the public is pretty divided, even though media bias wins out by a little bit. So all of these things are adding to the feelings of people about they're not liking this election cycle particularly. And when you ask this question, is negative campaigning when a group or a candidate accurately describes the position of another which they oppose, people don't even think that's a negative ad. And yet the gentleman here said that that is one of the useful things about a negative ad, is to tell when something is untrue. But people don't think when it's described like that it's a negative ad. So let's keep moving along here. Does the media report more on negative campaigning or on the issues raised by the candidates? 2/3 say negative campaigning. I teach media and politics and also Florida politics. The two gentlemen on the stage here that do the ads have come to my class many semesters, and the students really enjoy them. But what people complain about is that there is no reporting on issues. And interestingly, would you like to guess what age group that feeling is most intense on? It's not the older ones, it's the younger ones. This is my concern as a professor. The millennials are really getting absolutely turned off of politics as usual. Think of it, I have to do this at the beginning of every semester. How old were my students? You know, when things we were talking about. Most of them never heard of Ronald Reagan or all the things the rest of us have, sadly, for what we teach in high school, but nonetheless. So people don't feel like right now that they get any issues. And it's not just the media, it's the ads. Because the tone of the gubernatorial ads at the moment is such that it's back-to-back buys, and I'm sure everybody here is shaking their head. One simply cancels out the other. Let's take the economy. So one blames the other one for making Florida's economy the worst in history, and then right around, the finger is pointed in the other direction. Who does that hurt most? It's the casual voter who doesn't read everything, doesn't really hone in on things like you. They're pretty much left with kind of what they see and get a general feeling about, and they're not getting good feelings about this governor's race. Now, what do we teach in an academic setting? When we analyze campaign ads, these are the kind of things that I have my students really hone in on, just to give you a feel for the elements of campaign ads. Who's paying for the ad? And as one of you said here, you'd be hard-pressed. You have to get a magnifying glass out and stop an ad to be able to see it. You can't. You really cannot see who's sponsoring the ad, but it makes a whole lot of difference. The focus of the ad, the type of ad, people featured in the ad, and so forth. So if you look a little bit deeper here, there's several kinds of people that can pay for ads. You have candidates, you have parties, you have independent advocacy groups, and super PACs. Today, about 2/3 of the ads that are being run are not being run by the candidate. A great example of how we saw this early in Florida, and the nation also saw it front and center, was the Congressional District 13 race between Jolly and Sink and the Libertarian. I moderated the second debate, and I asked each of those candidates, not the gentleman, Libertarian, I'm forgetting his name right now, Lucas Ogilvie, yes. He didn't have any money to run ads. But when I asked Alex Sink and David Jolly, you know, did they feel like they were losing control over the tone and the message of their campaign? That's the one thing they agreed on all evening. And it's really the case, one of you made the point, candidates are losing control over message. They're getting overridden by some of these outside groups that have ulterior motives that extend beyond the current year and are really aimed at 2016. The type of ad, there's all different kinds, and you know, a bio ad, which usually people run at the beginning, an issue ad, and so forth. So the last one here, you don't see a lot of visionary ads in this election cycle, at least I haven't seen any. And so again, people in the context of an already negative political environment, you can see how people are becoming cynical and alienated. And these are just other things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but looking at who's featured in the ads are ways of looking at who they're targeting and so forth. And the props used, and you see a lot of this. And by the way, the newest trend is to take a journalist and put their quotes up there as validity, which makes the journalists look like they're either opposing or endorsing someone. It's a very bad situation, and it erodes further confidence in the objectivity of journalism. And then, obviously, where you film somebody, I tell my students, if you're going to do an environmental ad, you don't show up in a suit and tie. You know, things are pretty basic, but now things are getting really dicey. And then you have the colors and so forth, and print and whatever, and the audio and who they're targeting to. So you can see here there's a lot of different elements. When these gentlemen build an ad, they're looking at all of these things, and decisions have to be made. It's not just a quick, let's film something and put something up. You know, it's a lot more thought goes into it. A lot of polling, a lot of focus groups contribute to the design and the content of these ads. But these gentlemen are absolutely correct. They borrow a lot from what you see in pop culture. And pop culture these days is reality television. Now, I know that none of you will know what program this was, this particular situation came from. The program is called Teen Mom. Anybody here familiar with it? Not that you would raise your hand and say yes, but anyway, so obviously, if you're trying to reach the casual voter who doesn't have a college education, a lot of them, don't have a lot of time or inclination to read, and you take a look at what kind of TV programs they listen to, then you borrow from that some of the angles that seem to work. And I ask you, if you've watched a reality show, when's the last time that you've seen somebody be nice to somebody else on those? It's all about who can have the most negative punch at the end of the program, and that advances them. So again, pop culture is absolutely incorporated into our whole ad structure. And it's not just political ads. It's car ads, it's Geico, it's everything else. And I love this slide. This is a health slide. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, through the Harvard School of Health, did a test of what were the biggest stressors in America. Number one is juggling schedules of family members, but number two is hearing about what government or politicians are doing. And number three, watching, reading, or listening to the news. This is the environment in which our governor's race is taking place. And we are tight. We were the closest ever in terms of governor's races in 2010. 1.2% was all that differentiated Scott and Sink. We were, of all 50 states, by far the closest in the presidential. 0.9% was all that differentiated between the two candidates. And this is what normally happens. You see a big drop in a midterm election. You see it went from 75 to 49, and then it was 72, the slide's not showing here, in 2012. Now, why do I show this one? Because in 2012, Florida had the most money spent on television ads of any state, the second most candidate visits, and guess what? Turnout dropped. So when you talk about turnout, that was what I was challenged to talk about. You really watch this very carefully, because in a midterm election, the people who tend to really not vote in this kind of election, young voters, minorities, and unmarried females, that younger group is sticking out like a sore thumb because they're turned off of the party system. Their turnout is likely to be low. Democrats can't win without 18 to 29-year-olds turning out at a pretty decent clip. They were critical to Obama winning in the campaign, yet they're the very ones that are alienated by ads. The question is, I won't go there, but the medicinal marijuana, will that get them charged up? We'll see. But anyway, take a look at this. This kind of tells the story too. This was the primary that we just had, which was one of the lowest in decades in Florida. Where was turnout in this primary highest? The panhandle counties, the rural counties that aren't besieged by nonstop ads back to back. Where are they lower? Take a look. Broward, the largest concentration of Democrats in the state, 11% turnout. Both candidates, Chris and Nan Rich, worked that area from start to finish, and that's what they got. Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, those three counties in particular critical to Democrats' victory. And yet you're seeing that it's really hard to break that mold of a drop-off in turnout in urban areas which have larger concentrations of singles, young, and minorities. So my punchline here is, the way that we have the cycle right now, one negative after another, does not make a positive. It is not going to yield a higher turnout. I suspect that we could very easily have an even lower turnout this year than we had in the 2010 race. I hope I'm wrong, but when you look at the context and some of the other trends that we're seeing, you have to raise a big question mark. Now, being that I am somewhat, well, let me just state it this way. When people call USF and they want to talk to the political lady, they patch it through to me. I say, thank you for calling me a lady. It's very sweet. So, but anyway, this is just an email that I just got this last week from somebody I don't know, and I get them all the time. And I think this is really where we're at right now at this election. It says, watching the current ads for the governor's race is getting very upsetting. We hear back-to-back ads saying the opposite things, canceling each other out. Is there a place to check which is true or more true? What does that say? I hate all the mudslinging and can't wait for the election to be over. Thank you very much.
All right. All right, now we're going to get you involved. You've been sitting there and being such a good crowd to all of us as we talk about gloom and doom up here. And it's not gloom and doom. I'm one of the biggest cheerleaders for people getting involved in the process. And if you ever watch any of our coverage, you know I'm always out there saying, now you get out and vote, folks. You know, I've been told to cool it a little bit on that, but I'm not. I'm not going to. I'm tired of it. People, the politicians putting their lives on the line and then people not responding and then not turning out. It's like, oh my God. And then we go, oh, they had 8 days. Oh no, let's give them 14 days. No, let's give them 20 days. How about we just vote all year long, shall we? Will our turnout then be higher? Okay, enough of that. So here we go. We're going to another question that we want you to participate in. So get out your cell phones. This is question number 2. Should limits be imposed on contributions to political campaigns by individuals and organizations? And remember, you are now the Supreme Court of the United States. You can say whatever you want to say. Should limits be imposed on contributions to political campaigns by individuals and organizations? Text number again is 22333. Vote yes, that's 02, if you support limits on campaign contributions. Vote no, 02, if you do not support campaign contribution limits, and un-02 if you are undecided. Don't be undecided. I hate undecided people, okay? Fine. Make up your mind, as my wife always says. Make up your mind. Now, while you're voting, also talk about both of the survey questions that you had at your tables for just a few minutes. This is, we're going to give you an opportunity for you to talk. We're going to give you about 5 minutes. And the student facilitators that are at the tables, you're the guys that are responsible for keeping it going. We don't want one person to hog the conversation, so everybody get their 2 cents in, and we'll give you about 5 to 7 minutes. And we want to be great respecters of your time tonight, but I think this is one of these really great topics, so if we go a couple minutes late, I don't think anybody's going to scream too much here, so we got good stuff. So let's now, after you have voted, let's spend some time, student facilitators at your tables. If you don't have a student facilitator, just somebody speak up and start talking about some of your ideas, and then what we're going to do is we're going to come back and take a look at our survey results and then get some of your comments. So you've got some time to chat now, folks. Go ahead. All right, here we go. We're going to give you a chance to interact a little bit. Okay. I want some volunteers from the tables. Students, who wants to start this with your reaction? Tell me about some of the things you talked about at your table. This is the part where you talk. Anybody want to start over here? You better look out or I'll start picking people. It'll be like a church, okay? She wants to say something right here.
Well, I've got some wonderful people sitting here that who's had personal experience also. The Senator, thank you. One of the things that we discussed both questions, but number 2 we found very interesting to talk about as far as the limitations, because there'd be so many ways to get around that. Right now, of course, we know that candidates themselves have limitations on what they personally can spend, but there is no limit for the individual or for the corporation or the political action committee. So there really is not any way under the Supreme Court right now to be able to put those limitations back on. But also, would that reduce the amount of negative ads? And we really don't think that it would, because it is a freedom of speech issue. And one of the things that was brought up was the concept of moderating those and maybe rating them and saying what's allowed and what's not, but who would be the responsible entity and how could you really set that up from an ethical standpoint. So.
Yeah, slippery slope. All right, David, you got somebody over there? Somebody over there wants to say something? There you go. We'll keep it short and sweet so we get the more comments, the better.
I just wanted to answer that one thing that you said is the freedom of speech issue. It's a freedom of speech issue currently. I expect that the same thing may happen to the freedom of speech issue that the Supreme Court decided money is speech, that happened to the segregation laws that the Supreme Court said this applies now and was overturned. Hopefully in future years, money will not equal speech and corporations will not be people.
Wow. Well, okay, over here. We're going to grab another comment right over here at this table.
We spoke about, yes, it should be. A lot of us said, yes, it should be limited because it's a lot harder to buy someone's opinion You know, if you need 80 people to give you $25 versus the 4 people to give you $25, it's much harder for those 80 people to get your opinion and get you to sway one way. And then another reason that we should be, because the issues are being pushed under the table. The issues aren't being discussed. It's whatever they're eating for breakfast or whatever they don't have over here. You know, we really want to hear the issues instead of who this guy hates or what they did in college. So yes, we think they should be limited and given more to the facts, to the issues at hand instead of the money.
Okay, any more comments out here? We got another one right here. Go ahead.
Yeah, this was touched on earlier, and what really gets my dander up is about the fact that these ads can be negative ads and they can be lies, bold-faced lies. And they're so bold that the public even realizes it, but they're still being played. And so the only way I've come to satisfy my need to get rid of that is the mute button. I'm serious. I hit the mute button when a political ad comes on. These governor's ads right now, it's just automatically mute, mute.
Right.
And so it's turned me off, but I'm so just terribly upset about the fact that they can get away with it. Lie.
Right. Another comment. Interesting. While we're looking for another comment, just to give you a little quickie. So, how much responsibility is on the voters? Because there was a poll that was done recently of 1,600 potential voters, and the 1,500 potential voters, 42% of those voters did not know that the unemployment rate has dropped while Rick Scott has been governor. Now, it doesn't matter. That isn't a Democrat or Republican statement. 42% didn't even know that? Okay, you had a comment. Go ahead.
Yes, what Dr. McManus said earlier, I think made so much sense that people actually being turned off by this. And, you know, I'm from Connecticut. I just bought a home here in Palm Harbor. And I'm trying to get acquainted with the political scene down here. And I'm just like amazed that so early, actually we're about 5 weeks out, the amount of ads for the governor's race that are so negative and just like back to back. I can just imagine what's going to happen in the last 2 weeks before election. There's going to be nothing but political ads on. And it's really doing a disservice to the public because no one is learning anything and no one is being inspired. They're just being turned off. And I think all that money is being totally wasted. And money in politics is volume. He who has the most money gets heard the most. Right. It's a shame because good ideas get drowned out.
Okay, we have another comment over here. David, you got one?
Hello. Well, we discussed for question 2 that there should be limits because we felt that the money was just going out of control. Money speaks, and it's just going all over the place. And the corporations, the lobbyists, the super PACs, they all need to be limited in what they do and how they spend this money because, like it was stated, the candidates are even saying they're losing control of what they say in their campaigns. So we just felt it needed to be limited for that reason so that it could return to basic, they have control.
Okay, another comment over here.
I was disappointed in the limitation of the question. You had the yes, the no, and the undecided. Nowhere did it say anything about unlimited amounts, but with total transparency of who gave every dollar without regard to the masking of these dollars now. So that would have dealt with the issue of the freedom of speech at the same time as the public, if they chose to know who was giving what for to whom.
Okay, another question over here.
Most people have gotten.
Okay.
Hi, we were split on the this question about the limits on the campaign. Susan, my question to you would be, if that was limited, do you think that would keep more of the outside money away from the candidates? I mean, do you think that they would be more focused on have more control? It's just a question.
I'm not real sure on that. There's been a lot of polling done. If you ask in general, would you like to restrict money in campaigns? Overwhelmingly, 80% or so of Americans say yes. But if you follow up, do you think they would find a way around it? You know, everyone's of that opinion too. People are very frustrated. And also, let me also point out, we talk about the groups that Citizens United. You have to include with corporations and unions, so you have to be fair. Both of those groups were mentioned in that case. But the problem you run into, and I agree with the transparency argument, money is always going to be in politics, but it would be nice if we know who's putting it in there. And right now, this largest amount that's coming in is the very part that's cloudy, that you can't really see. But I always also put things in perspective. How much does it cost to run one Super Bowl ad for 30 seconds? This is still, and I know these gentlemen would agree, you could talk about online ads and everything else and newspapers and mailers, but it's still a TV world when it comes to campaigning in big states like Florida to reach a lot of people. And if you had limits, the person that's most disadvantaged by it is the incumbent, is the challenger, as opposed to the incumbent, who has the benefit, in kind or whatever, of name recognition. But it's a tough question. All of these things are very tough. But to me personally, let me see who's giving it. Let me make up my mind about who's giving it. And but we've found ways around that already.
Okay, there's also a comment way in the back there. Can we get a microphone all the way in the back? You want some back there? Because what we're going to do, folks, we're going to transition into more kind of a Q&A. We're having a good conversation here, so we're going to try to keep this going.
Okay, so why this question was asked is because of volume versus content, restricting volume versus content, which is one of the themes that I heard reoccurring in this meeting today. And I want to say, without touching on the freedom of speech and intercepting that, you can restrict funds and limit them, and therefore you basically affect the volume versus the content. I also wanted to say, to ensure that politicians are focusing on issues instead of campaign funds and what their benefactors are going to think about, this would probably help. So I would agree with limiting funds for campaign ads.
Okay, I see another comment over here in the blue.
Well, I've got about 2 hours worth of comments I could make, but I'll keep them to just two.
Okay.
2 comments. The first is, and something we talked about here at our table, the unintended, or maybe it's someone's intention, consequence of all of this is the discouragement of younger folks in our community to run for office. I used to be very successful at recruiting young people and go to the classes and talk to them about getting involved in our political process and how easy it was to run for office and how rewarding it would be, et cetera. I don't feel like I can do that anymore in good conscience. That's number one. And number two, my husband and I have discovered something even better than the mute button. We take turns. Who's driving tonight? I'm driving, so I'll keep the remote, and we change the channel. And sometimes, guess what? We find something we like better on the other channel, and that first channel has lost our business. So I don't know that it really, anybody keeps track of that, but it makes us feel real good.
All right. Let's, can we go ahead and put the results from both of our surveys up on the screen right now, if we would? This was the first one, should limits be imposed on contributions to political campaigns? That was 80-20. I think people are pretty much in agreement on that one, or at least that's where it ferrets out. And then do we have the answers to the second one, or the first one? Does negative advertising serve a legitimate purpose? And we were split on that, with more people saying no and a higher percentage saying yes. Okay, let's just talk just a little bit here, guys and gals, about the, by the way, I have to tell you a funny story about the word gals. I used that once on the air and I got chewed out because somebody said, in the South, that's a pejorative. You can't call women gals, so I have to be careful. So, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about, is it always true that he or she who spends the most money always wins?
No way.
Well, then why do we make the assumption then that with all these outside dollars coming in that somehow there's something wrong with that, believing that the money is the one that decides what the vote is?
That's too easy a question. How much more money? I mean, if you're going to be outspent 20 to 1, 30 to 1, 100 to 1, well, yeah, that person's probably going to win. But if you're...
Yeah, my comment would be that I don't need the most money, but I need enough money. And that's the deciding factor.
But why will they win? Because of the extra money? Because your ads brought their name up more often? Because you attacked more often? Because it gave them a higher name recognition? Which? What is it?
I can run crummy ads as much as I want, but a message that actually connects to the point that Gregory made. A lot of the stuff I don't think connects with people. I mean, the Duke Energy ads, and we talked about this yesterday, and in my mind, they cancel each other out, and it's like, okay, both of these can't be true, and they can't be, and they aren't. And I think people have enough of a built-in shock-proof crap detector that says, I'm going to turn that off, and I'm not going to take it. So they can spend all the money they want on that, and I think ultimately, it's the guy who shouts the loudest doesn't win on that. But good, good advertising that connects with people, that moves people in a certain way can do it. But you need enough to be able to do that. You just can't run in a state like Florida, or you can't run in a county like Pinellas County without enough money to be able to get a message out.
Susan, you're going to say something.
I was just going to say that sometimes the really lavish spenders, and this is increasingly a pattern, are people that have been successful in other fields and just think, well, I'd like to play in the world of politics. It used to be said, this is sexist, so I'll admit it. It used to be said that guys who owned, were really successful in business would buy a sports team. Now they run for political office. But the interesting thing is you're even seeing wealthy women, like the California women, like Meg Whitman and so forth, very successful, highly successful in business, thinking, why not give politics a shot? But it's not a one-for-one thing. The road is strewn with people who've spent a lot of money and don't have anything to show for it, except a lot of unused yard signs or something.
Yeah, and here's another comment that we talked about, because since PolitiFact has come along, and I have the privilege of being able to do that 3 or 4 times a week, and on the weekends, what I've really discovered in talking to the PolitiFact staff is that so many of them are now half-true. It's what I call cause and effect. They will take one fact, which what I would call the cause. Well, he took money from Duke Energy. That's the cause. We know that's a fact. And then tried to hide it from the voters. Well, that may not be true, but because the first fact was stated, they always make the causation. And both candidates do this. So how does it help the public when they always go, well, it's half true? And I'm kind of going, well, duh, we know that.
And that's also one of the things. PolitiFact is fantastic. And the head of the PolitiFact has come to my class also and admitted that sometimes they have a lot of fights even among themselves as to what rating to give it. But it's somewhat a law of unintended consequences, because it is really difficult to find any 30-second spot on a complex subject. Let's take the Affordable Care Act. Anybody that's analyzing the ad is going to find something wrong with it that wasn't included, and yet 30 seconds is 30 seconds. But the more that a person looks at these ratings and finds half true, you get the kind of comment that the lady sent to me of thinking, well, none of them are truly true, so they become more cynical about all of them.
Greg, you're thinking. You're going to say something.
Well, you're absolutely right about 30 seconds, but to see, and we keep talking about television advertising, so let's stay there for a moment. It is not necessarily meant to be a rational medium. It's meant to be an emotional medium. No, you can't make a rational case in 30 seconds. And that's not what television advertising is there for. It's there to make an impression on you. It's there to impact you emotionally. You're not going to remember what was said in the commercial. You're going to remember how you felt about it. And so, no, don't try to connect too much rational thought to political television advertising.
Right now, what's catching people's attention the most, and I'm sure most of you will agree, are the taglines at the end where they say, wants another job, or can't be trusted, lousy governor is a bottom punchline. It's those takeaway lines that are clever, because we look at them right now in class every week. And the funny, the hard-hitting, goes back to my point about reality TV, younger people. The hard-hitting punchline at the end, which makes the person look really bad, is what the millennials are drawn to.
And there's some great ones out there, Susan. He's everything you hate about politics. It resonates right now. Too shady for the Sunshine State.
They're very clever. They are.
And for the powerful few, not you.
Any more questions from the outside? Because I could keep going for a while here, but we want to see if you have any questions you'd like to ask them specifically. We have your one over here, lady in the white, please.
Jack, this is to you. To you and your colleague. I'm wondering, who pays you? Do the candidates pay you? Do you take outside money? I mean, that's my question.
No, I want we'll give away my trade secrets. It depends. I mean, generally speaking, an arrangement is made with a candidate to represent a specific campaign, and in my case, and I think as any consultant, and that's an exclusive contract to work on that campaign. It would be highly unusual and, in my book, unethical for me to then work for another cause that was working against or whatever. Might another group come to you and say, oh, we really want to help your candidate, would you do some work? And that now, under the, after Citizens United and the changes that have been made in Florida, those coordinations can take place and can be done by the same. There was a day when that could not happen, and we'd have to say, no, you'll have to go see so-and-so or whatever we have to do is independently. But most of the time, I would say most of the situations are one client, one cause.
If they come to you and say, we're going to try and help your guy win, is that enough for you to take on that?
Well, many times it's not so much taking on, it may be just a supervisory role and saying, here's what the campaign is planning. If you want to help, here's some things that you could do. Or if you want to tell me what you've got planned, that coordination is allowed now. And there was a time that it wasn't. So it just kind of depends. Every case is different. From a personal ethical standpoint, like I referred to in talking, I'm at a point in my career where I have the luxury and I have a wife that has a great job, that I'm maybe not worried about making payroll so much on Friday as I am, really doing the right thing. And I just don't, I would say fully a third of the people that walk across my door at least, I'm not interested in taking on for whatever reason, or a cause for that matter. So, but that depends, that varies. If you're a 20-something trying to get started in the business, your ethical compass may be a little bit different.
Yeah, I used to say that when I first got in this business in the 80s, if you were running for dog catcher and had $50, I wanted to represent you. Don't have to do that anymore. Really, my situation's not much different than Jack. We work for the majority of the time directly with candidates and with relatively little outside influence or inquiry, but if there is, it's generally a courtesy. Well, here's what we're doing, or here's how you could help, or oh, you need some pictures of our candidate. Sure, we can provide those, but leave us alone. We're grateful for your work. So, but you have to keep in mind that I'll speak for myself, but I think it's relatively similar. We work fairly down ballot, where you don't see quite as much of that play as you do if you were, working in a gubernatorial or a Senate race or something. There, your question would be far more complicated to answer.
The other question, go ahead.
I think it was pointed out by Dr. McManus's slide that there's negative public opinion about unethical politicians as well as journalists. And so my question is for all of you, but really for El Rochelle. I think that the question that is often asked of the public is, what do you think? What do you think of this issue, rather than investigating or educating or elucidating? It's more an opinion poll of people rather than actually educating people. So I'm wondering why this method is used. It really seems like it's not news. It's an opinion poll oftentimes.
Well, like these guys use the word downstream, local media is tremendously different than national media. Local media, what we do at Bay News 9, you don't care what I think. I mean, and to be honest with you, I don't care if you know what I think. I just ask the questions that I know you want asked. I think I try to keep it very obvious and very straightforward. So, my opinion doesn't matter. I talk to, it doesn't matter to my wife, it does a lot, but when I talk to these candidates, that's not what we do. But what you have to see that's happened on a national level is that on a national level, and it isn't just with Fox, it's CNN, is that people, what are we doing right here? People like to hear opinions. Why? Because no matter what your opinion is, it's yours and you can never be wrong. But it's not news, but you watch it. You watch it. If you didn't watch it, if you didn't watch Bill O'Reilly, if you didn't, CNN brought back Crossfire. Why'd they bring back Crossfire? Because people love to see that fire back and forth. Now, that's unfortunate, but well, you're right, that's not news. Neither is Lindsay Lohan going into rehab for the 15th time. Well then, when people call you up and ask you what you watch, don't say you watch that. Don't watch Entertainment Tonight. Don't watch TMZ. You talk about the millennials, where do they get most of their political news? Susan knows, Jon Stewart. Hello? Yeah, and you're right. Oh, he's old news now, where do they get it from?
I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, they're still working on that. So, television has always fed the appetite of people that watch it. It is primarily a news, a money-making organization, and when networks are in the process of trying to attract audiences, they do little meters with you and they get focus groups and say, well, what do you like about this person, and does that person make your skin crawl? I'll give you a perfect example. This isn't opinion, this is fact. When Roger Ailes took over Fox News, what happened to the news desk? It's gone. What do you have now? Legs. The majority of the anchors on that particular network are women. But they're not just beautiful blonde women, beautiful women of color. They all happen to be lawyers, too. And Miss America pageant contest winners. So the old stereotypes, you can call them, a dumb individual, or say they're there just because they have pretty blonde hair. I wouldn't want to take on...
What's wrong with blondes?
Right. I wouldn't want to take on Megyn Kelly, who served as worked within Judge Rehnquist's office as one of his staff assistants in that office. That's why people are watching news. We don't do that on a local basis. Well, I know, I say news to you. You don't think we have this discussion every day? Are you kidding me? No, it's not news, but that's the way it is. Yeah, go ahead. He's dead.
Have we changed that much that we used to watch Cronkite, and now we watch whoever that woman is? I said we watched Cronkite. Why did we watch Cronkite, and have we changed that much that years ago we watched Cronkite and now we watch Megyn Kelly?
The answer is simple. It's really ABC, CBS, NBC. When we grew up, there were 3. If you lived in rural Iowa, there was 1. And we were lucky we had Captain Kangaroo. I don't know how I would have grown up as crazy as I was. That's one answer. Second answer, 1,584 channels on Bright House. Of those 1,584 channels on Bright House or more, probably 25 to 30 are all opinion channels. People have gravitated. What was the big promise with the internet? We would learn so much more and we would have a greater girth of our understanding of all of the issues. What do? Go to look under your favorites, and you're going to be like everybody else. You got favorites that are conservative, some of them that are liberal. Not very many people look at the girth of information that's out there, which we thought would happen. Isn't that right, Dr. McManus?
Yeah, the cable news is very polarized. We know MSNBC, attracts Democrats and liberals. Fox, conservatives, Republicans. CNN in the middle, they position themselves business-wise. What's the channel that's struggling the most right now? That one. And what is happening is these cable channels we go to and we believe what we hear on our favorite, and we think all the rest of them are untruthful. Gone are the days which you suggested where there was a unifying figure, or you would only, you would have someone like that who could unify the nation. Right now you don't have that because we didn't have cable then. 24/7, people can pick when they want to listen to the news, and we didn't have 3 of these cables that have positioned themselves ideologically. Why? Because the public is divided, and they've each chosen a business model.
Let me ask you, I'm sorry, just one more to close. If anybody has been watching the Roosevelt thing on television, the one thing that struck me more than anything else was that the newsmen didn't focus on FDR's paralysis. They wouldn't take pictures. He fell. They didn't show that. And you have the feeling nowadays that no matter what news program, channel, or anything was there, and he fell flat on his face, that they would all be taking pictures and, in fact, rooting for it. Does that, what my question really was have we changed that much?
Yes, and the answer is yes.
We
you
have.
We have.
Culture.
Millennials have
That's
changed. Social media has changed. There's more information than ever. You know what's changed us more than anything? That cell phone, because now there's video everywhere, and you saw it with Romney. Because but the bad thing about what happens with cell phones is there's no context. And when there's no context, then you can take that video and make it say anything that you want to. And we are not as discerning as we should be. We do not use the media as intelligently, and this is coming from a guy who's on the media and who does all these battles and reads your emails about what you think we should and shouldn't be covering. I would like to see the voters take more responsibility. I would like to see the voters say, I'm tired of negative ads, and I'm going to go to the poll and I'm going to do something that says I'm against that. But do we see those kind of movements taking place? Susan, will we ever?
No, what you're going to see is fewer people going to the polls.
And we think that's the answer because the fewer people, but in reality it's not, because then the decisions that affect all of us are made by less than 10% of the people that vote. Another question right here, go ahead.
Okay, I remember being younger, and like we had Bob Graham as a governor, and he had working days, you know, and the ads you would see was, hey, he went out and he worked on this construction job, or he was on the shrimp boat. Then you had Governor Childs who walked. You know, his thing was walking. Well, what happened to, like, you could get to know something about the candidate personally? Because I feel as though, like, they're doing more advertising than they are campaigning. You know, and I'm just asking the gentleman because we're bashing so much, or this guy's opinion on this and this guy's opinions on that. We never get to know the candidate through whoever they're paying to help them or to disengage the other guy.
I don't think you'll find anybody that's better at retail politics and impressing the flesh than Charlie Crist in this generation anyway. I'm not trying to keep score opposite the governor, but I think that's fairly obvious. The old joke about Governor Crist used to be if you waved at him from across the street, you'd get a thank you or a hi, nice to see you again letter from him the next day in the mail. So maybe you just haven't had the opportunity to cross paths with him. But I want to answer that lady's question. One of the reasons why you see more opinion and less news is that it's simply cheaper to produce. And television is in the business to have content up there 24/7, and journalism is expensive. Good journalism is even more expensive. Some jerk's opinion, that comes at a pretty affordable price, relatively speaking.
One quick comment back over here to the retail campaigning, and to turn the paradigm around. I think part of the problem is we don't join anymore. People are not joiners. Talk to any professional association, talk to your Moose, Elk Club, or what. Membership's all dropping. People don't do that anymore. Their idea of joining is Facebook. Their idea of joining is sitting at home, yelling at the television. Their idea, that paradigm has changed completely. It's not Friday night bowling. It's not, you know, maybe a golf game or whatever. People are not joiners anymore. And so then the challenge becomes to a candidate, how can I reach out? How can I touch the most people? Well, that's touching them with the media that they're watching now. That's talking to them on Facebook or being their friend on Instagram or, you know, not doing the traditional retail stuff. And it's unfortunate. But, you know, it'd be nice tonight if this event attracted 500 people, but it didn't.
And I guess the fear, and I'll wrap this up because I'm going to ask you one more poll question here. Maybe Thomas Jefferson was right. Maybe we need to have a bloody revolution every couple hundred years. So, I mean, that's the real fear on the backside of everything. But I'll leave that to him. Okay, now, before I take a final question, let's pause for our final instant poll. Okay? And here's what it's going to be. What is the primary choice of information about politics and political issues? You're going to be able to choose one. A, mainstream newspapers and/or radio, such as Tampa Bay Times or NPR. B, network TV news programs like ABC, NBC, CBS. Oh, you're so kind to put Bay News 9 in there as the network, so that's very nice of you. C, other TV or radio. That could also be the Comedy Channel, late night comics, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity.
This is a biased poll.
Chris Todd. I didn't, whatever, okay. And D, social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. So go ahead, keep voting. Now again, this is non-scientific, so we're just, you know, we're just trying to figure it out. And let me ask, I'm going to ask the final question here because it's the one that I think is always kind of important. So for our panel up here, what's most important? A person's policy or a person's likability?
The key to victory in just about any campaign, they have to like you before they trust you. They have to trust you before they'll vote for you. So, likability.
I said it when I was up there, but first, who do you know, who do you like, and who do you trust? Boom.
Likability, but there's about 10% who are at one issue. Excuse me, I've got. Yes, thank you. About 10% are single issue voters, and in close elections in like states like Florida, they can make a difference.
All right, great. Last look at the votes. We got 48% think the mainstream radio and television, Tampa Bay Times, NPR. Second one with the most is 24%. That would be social media. Then we have mainstream TV news program at 19%. And just for me, you do understand the difference between local media like Bay News 9 versus national media. Am I being, you know, too thick that I'm thinking that there is a difference? I just know that I've been in the business for 40-some years, and local is not like network at all. We strive much harder and keep opinion out of it as much as possible because I'm equally hated by Republicans and Democrats, so I'm doing the right thing. Let me just say one last thank you to our panel here. Let's give them a round of applause because they've done such a great job for us. And especially thank you to Dave Clement, who has done such a great job of organizing all these materials and putting it all together for us. Dave, why don't you come up and wrap it up?
Thank you, Al. I wonder what you think about the result. Did the social media total surprise you?
No, not at all. In fact, that's why we're on social media and we get more hits on Twitter than we do in our own email. So I guess we all live like birds. Tweet, tweet.
Well, we put that in there just to give some indication of how you, all of us, are getting our news about politics and the campaigns. It's just an interesting observation. And I would like to ask a special round of applause for our moderator as well as the panel once more, please. And if I may take the liberty of recognizing our staff and volunteers who helped put this together, Jacqueline Schuett, Shantae Williams, Tom Gorgian, Sarah Pemberton, Betsy Collins, Patricia Winden, Doris Burns, Jonathan Sullivan on the audiovisual board, and Jeremy Peplow on the TV camera. Thank you very much, staff. And a final word, just to let you know about our our upcoming programs. Our next Village Square, you're not going to want to miss that. It's a presentation by Hedrick Smith, a name that may mean something to people of my generation and perhaps one below me. He's going to be talking about his most recent book, Who Stole the American Dream? And he is going to be a very provocative speaker, I know. Before that, to help you know about the candidates who are running for local office, we're going to have a campaign forum on October 2nd. at 5:30 p.m. We'll also talk about the amendments on the ballot. And finally, on September 30th, one more round of the transit tax referendum. We've done two previously, one here in Seminole, one in Midtown. The final one is in Clearwater. Hope you will come to learn everything you need to know about the referendum on the 1-cent sales tax. That's it. Thank you so much for attending, and have a safe trip home.